Um, and the other part, that I think we've learned is what really is important to people. Like I think that for at least for me was fairly unclear at the start of this journey. But for token oriented folks, consistency and reliability of proof of coverage, I think, has been a real pain point. Like the rate of POC goes up and down, receipts vanish, no one knows why. It's a complicated system that's very, very difficult to debug. And then for users of the network, data reliability is critical. So we built a system called state channels, which I think a bunch of you know, that is responsible for packet metering and making sure that packets get delivered to the other side and counted for. And that system also quite complicated, quite very novel, very clever way to solve the problem, but very, very complicated. And makes it, again, difficult to debug where a packet is failing. Is it failing because there's RF interference? Is there a problem with the hotspot? Is there a problem with the packet forwarder on the hotspot? The problem with the sensor. There's like so many places already that a packet could like not show up from. That adding these layers of complexity makes it even harder to debug when something goes wrong. So that's sort of where we sort of came at the problem from. Is that we've learned a lot. We understand um, what the problems are. We understand what people need. So, regardless, I'm just going to ignore the sort of L1 swap part for a second because I know that seems to get the most attention. The desire was really to try and simplify the architecture such that proof of coverage and data credit transfers were extremely reliable, right? So there was no ambiguity, for example, how often your hotspot was supposed to beacon, right? We would just do that very consistently, like on an hourly timer or something like that. And so that reduces another sort of unknown point of the system, which is that you have this very complicated, challenging system today. So we wanted to simplify it all the way down as far as we could. Um, we think the best way to do that, at least for now, is to have a single oracle that is sort of air quotes of the server that is responsible for um, generating entropy, validating receipts, doing the pieces of POC that are still important, similar to the way validators do today, but stripping out all of the consensus protocol stuff and all the complicated hard bits that make this very slow. And then doing the same thing on the other side for data credit transfers is to try and simplify the architecture down there as much as possible, no longer develop our own proprietary LoRaWAN server, try and make the packet routing oracle, the name probably needs a little bit of work, but compatible with as many LoRaWAN network servers as possible. So as I think a bunch of you know, there are several different LoRaWAN network servers. They call these LNSs. AWS has one. There's an open source one called ChirpStack. There's the Things Network. There's industrial sort of commercial grade ones like Senet and Actility. We just wanted the packet routing part of the system to be compatible on the other side, so that anyone could plug any LNS in. And we think just simplifying it down to that level, making it more compatible with the rest of the LoRaWAN ecosystem, is a good solution to reaching larger scale on the device side. And again, takes us out of the business of building a proprietary LNS, which is largely undifferentiated from everything else on the market. So that's like in overarching terms, just like trying to summarize a bit of the history and how we got here and what the goals are of this proposal. That's sort of the most of it. Having this Oracle architecture means that the stuff that ends up happening on the L1 level of the blockchain is very, very simple. Like there's not really that much going on there anymore. It's about creating HNT. It's about creating the sub-DAO token, so IoT and mobile for now. It's about taking input from the oracles and then distributing HNT to the people, or IoT or mobile to the entities that deserve it, who did the work. And so that's all the L1 really does. Like all the hard stuff like POC and data transfer is now not inside the blockchain logic itself. Um, and so, which L1 you pick as a result of that architectural decision, I think matters a lot less. You could do this on our own L1. You could perhaps have done it on Ethereum. I think the fee structure there is still a little bit of a problem. You could do it certainly on Cardano or Polkadot, or it's doable on, I think, almost any L1. Maybe not Bitcoin because it doesn't have the idea of tokens. Um, and there's a bunch of reasons that we sort of went with the choice that we went with after looking at all the different pros and cons, which we can get into later. But the important part, I think, to take away from it is that the L1's function is very, very simple here. And so it kind of doesn't really matter that way anymore. It's not critical in terms of what it needs to do. All the Helium specific bits are not on the chain and still built and maintained, or at least built and designed by us. And that's, I think the important part to take away is that the L1 function is significantly simplified. So anyway, I'll stop there. That's kind of a summary of how we got here and some of the thinking behind it, but happy to get into any questions, or if Mark or Abai or anyone else has anything to add, definitely jump in.
I think we should go straight to questions.
Yeah, I agree.
So just for context for folks, we've dropped a form in the community chat text channel where we've been collecting questions over the past few days. We can probably go ahead and open up the channel for questions a little bit later on, but in the meantime, I think Mark, Abai, Amir, do you all have access to this list of questions?
I do. Does the Google Sheet?
Yep. I don't know if we want to let you sort of pick some that are standing out to you, or we're sort of happy to sort of feed you a couple of questions to kick things off here.
Yeah, why don't you read out whichever ones look interesting, I guess. I'm up to you how you want to do it.
All right, where do we start in here? Scott, any favorites?
Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up right now. So I have a little bit of issues on my side. I'll have one shortly.
There's, I think we have questions in here. So obviously we're not going to get to all of these. So we're going to try and pick some stuff that tends to represent a lot of what's going on, we're seeing in the community. Let's go ahead and grab this first one off the list. So the question asks, if proof of coverage and data credits will be moved to Solana, what will Helium validators and the Helium blockchain be used for? Just transactions? Will validators earn less than what they are earning today?
Seems like I can take that one if you want, Mark, just because it's
sure
low. It's dumb enough for me to get into. So one important thing to understand about this proposal is that moving to a different L1 and moving to this Oracle-based architecture means that there are no longer validators in the Helium ecosystem. Like that is not an actor in the ecosystem anymore. So that, I think it's 6.85% of HNT that they are currently earning for the work they do, that goes back into the pool, so that 6.85% is no longer carved out. So I guess that does mean they earn less than what they're earning today, because they will earn nothing for the function of validating. There is a new form of staking and yield in the system, which is called VEHNT. It's like vote escrowed HNT. So you can lock up your HNT, earn a percentage of HNT that gets created, and in exchange for that, you get voting power effectively in the governance process. So it's kind of an interesting model. It is potentially useful in the sense that you no longer have to run a big server, and you no longer have to put up 10,000 HNT, and you don't have to actually perform the validation functions anymore, but you can still earn a percentage of HNT that gets created and participate in the governance process there. So there's still a way for validator operators, and frankly any HNT holder, to participate in yield. That way, it's just different from running a server that validates transactions and creates blocks, because that's now going to be handled by another blockchain.
As a corollary, I think part of the question was, what if POC and data credits move to Solana? Technically, proof of coverage, like the actual beginning and witnessing, it does not happen on the Solana chain, right? That happens off chain, and the corresponding rewards that are deduced from that are oracled back to this to the Solana chain. But the proof of coverage calculations, the beaconing, the reporting, all that stuff happens off chain.
Great. I think maybe just a quick follow-up to that question is, will more rewards go to hotspots? I didn't get a Discord handle from the person that asked that, but sort of related.
Yeah, I mean the distribution of tokens is now a little bit different after HIP 51, 2, and 3 than it is today. But I think in basic terms, yes, the 6.85% that was going to validators now goes back into the HNT pie. But there's other stuff inside HIP 52 and 53 that I'll try not to get into in this call, but the distribution of tokens is definitely different than it is today. But in general, the supply of HNT going to hotspot operators should go back up as a result of the validators no longer being there.
Cool. So Siegfried asked a question, will the move to Solana affect transaction fees? If so, will they get lower or cheaper? Will voting on HIPs become cheaper? And that maybe opens a little bit of a question just around voting generally.
Probably worth you grabbing that one. I've been talking the whole time already.
Sure. Yeah. So as far as transaction fees, one of the things that we know about is Solana has significantly cheaper transaction fees than we do on our chain. And so there's actually been some interesting analysis going on in the HIP 70 channel around this. I think we should pin those posts, and I will do that in a little bit. But and sort of share a little more widely what these fees are going to look like. As far as voting, that's actually a really interesting point. Today, when we vote on our network, the way we do that is by burning, sort of a minimal amount of HNT into data credits in order to vote for a particular direction for HIP. So there's a for and an against burn transaction that happens, and it costs about 35 cents. So it's actually kind of interesting, and with a future model, so Solana has this concept called SPL governance. It's sort of a contract that was written by the Solana Labs folks, and roughly speaking, we're going to be using that plus some extensions to that to enable this vote escrow locking. And so if you have vote escrow tokens, all you're really submitting is a signature. And so, all you really need to do is lock, and now you can participate with signatures. If you're familiar with systems like Snapshot on Ethereum, it's very similar to that.
Cool. I'll have to learn a little bit more about those other voting mechanisms. I probably should have kicked off with this question. So Pactra asked, will this switch benefit the greater Helium community the most, or will it benefit the devs, the core team, the early investors of HNT, or the rest of the HNT community? Do the majority of votes come from hotspot owners? Or do they come from early investors, core team? So I guess there's kind of two questions in there, but one is who's benefiting from HIP 70 and why are we doing it maybe in that regard? And then the other is like, where are these votes coming from when we do voting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, of course, our belief is that it benefits the community the most. I would say. I mean, it's all the work we do is really for that community already. So our attempt to kind of optimize how things work, I think, should be a benefit, right? If I think of the 3+ years since we launched, and sort of the amount of time that I've spent on Discord and Reddit and stuff like that, just sort of understanding what people's issues and frustrations are. I think having more consistent POC, for example, is a huge deal. Like, it may not ultimately get to the point of I want more rewards, which is, I think, what pretty much everyone that's like really everyone's thing. But at least having consistency around how POC works, so that it's beaconing consistently and you're being witnessed consistently, and just that you understand how it works. I think that's a huge win. So like we need to kind of stay focused on that, and I think that's a massive sort of win for the community and sort of all the participants. And then the same for stuff like data transfer, right? I mean, there have been times where some of the issues on the network have prevented us from being able to gain more users at times, just candidly, right? Like there are users that have been ready to use the network and excited and wanted to use the network in decent scales, but have had problems here or there that have prevented us from being able to onboard them. So this kind of work is like a huge benefit in all directions, right? Like it should ultimately increase like the reliability and performance of proof of coverage. It will allow us to spend more time on improving proof of coverage, so that we aren't focused on sort of the underlying, the belly of the beast stuff when it comes to L1s, and just focused on the things that matter, like proof of coverage and data transfer. And the end result of that should just be a better, bigger set of networks that have more utility. Or like I think ultimately, hopefully, we're all here for the utility. And this should be a step in the direction of just making it more reliable, more compatible with more network providers and software, which ultimately we hope would lead to more users as well.
Great. So sort of on the topic of network usage, there's a couple of questions. Folks have latched on to ChirpStack being a part of this. Folks have questions around the future of Helium VIP console. I'll go ahead and I like the ones where I can attribute the question to somebody. Not everyone put their Discord handle in, so neither of these have that. Let's go ahead and ask. We've integrated the Helium VIP console already. Migration will be done in Q3 2023. What does the impact us? How can we follow this change?
Yes, so for that group, so firstly, I realized I didn't answer the last part of the question, which was from the last question, which was, do the majority of the votes come from hotspot owners, or do they come from early investors, core team, foundation, and guard? Very Luna-like of HNT. I mean, I actually don't know the voting breakdown. I'll just say that in general, 67% of the HNT is in the hands of hotspot owners. So if all hotspot owners voted, for example, like they would be the majority of HNT. In general, I don't think the large wallets have turned out much in the votes. Like I don't remember a vote where one of the top 20 or 25 wallets by HNT count voted. I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. It's just something to be aware of. So. But that is the distribution of tokens, like 67, I think, percent of the tokens are in the hand of the HNT of the hotspot miners. Okay, so that was one. On the VIP console question, I don't have a perfect answer for you here. Maybe Dal does, but he's not on this town hall. Other than to say that there is a process that will be coming. Oh, there is Dal. I'll let him answer. Did you catch that part of the question, Dal?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Amir.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so part of Hit 70, as Amir mentioned, is really shifting focus of the team so that we can build out this foundation for partners and ecosystem to really feel confident that data transfer is reliable and scalable. So that is the priority of the team. For people who have I think they said there was some integration work that they did with on the VIP. So today, Nova Labs is hosting a router console service, and what we've discovered is that rather than us hosting this and being kind of like very much a bottleneck to on-ramping devices, we want to really involve the partner and the ecosystem. And so what we're planning on doing is working with partners so that they are able to host their own LNS and provide these services to other organizations. If you're already working and integrating with VIP, we will definitely let us know. We'll work with you in terms of transitioning that to what we're focused on in terms of church stack as an LNS that we standardized on. So this is an effort that we feel is really going to provide more usage on the network, and kind of similar to, if you think about with HIP-19, initially we were the only ones that were building hotspots, and then HIP-19 came out, we opened up to other manufacturers, and then we really saw the coverage explode. And this is the same type of strategy that we're taking with this HIP-70 in terms of focusing on the underlying foundation and making it very scalable and reliable for the ecosystem. Don't tell me I was on mute.
No, you're great. Thank you, Dal.
Okay,
thanks.
Just trying to pick our next question here.
So one thing, I think we covered it a little bit. There was a question on who is running it. It's not attributed, but who is running the oracles, which, Amir kind of started to, or I couldn't remember if it was Amir or Abak who started that. But as far as what process is there towards decentralization of them, how are they now very targeted as far as security risks and how those are going to be managed?
Today, I'll take a first stab. Some of that is process driven. Obviously, they're run on behalf of the foundation. Just as far as ownership goes, like operationally, just like we running existing routers, the core team can run the oracles today. The intent is for that system is built out of three parts. One of them is the ingesters that ingest events, the verifiers that verify those events and generate either rewardable or invalid derivatives. And then the reward server takes that and produces rewards. I know I'm a robot. I can't switch to mobile.
I can try to repeat.
I just let Mark know that he was sounding like a robot.
So I think that the bits that he was talking about, I think, were around, who's responsible for the oracles, and the proposal is that the Nova Labs team would be building the oracles, but the foundation ultimately would be responsible for them, and we'd be running them sort of on behalf, at least initially. And there's multiple different components for these oracles. There's sort of the ingestion side of this thing, which is of this architecture, which allows all of the hotspots to be able to interact with the oracles. There's sort of the data itself with storage layer, where all the sort of raw data goes in, and there's sort of a data pipeline that leads to, ultimately to rewards being issued to, hotspot owners. So there's sort of the three different parts of it, and we sort of talk about at a high level what that looks like in the HIP. We didn't want to go too specific and say, well, this thing's going to live in S3 and this thing's going to live in, I don't know, I'm going to make stuff up now, Amazon Kinesis or something like that, if you know data stuff on Amazon. And the reason for that is we wanted to follow up with, here's how the Nova Lab team plans to implement. That should be kind of separate from the HIP, from our perspective.
Right. Okay, so I'm still robot. The key is to split the system up and really only have them constrained to accessing bucketed files that are really not changeable, right? So security is sort of built in because the reward server only operates on buckets of rewardable events and pushes rewards into a blockchain, whichever one it may be.
All of Mark's answers take extra 30 seconds to process in our heads, so we'll leave the thing there. Maybe a follow-up question for just talking about oracles. So how will we know if an oracle is functioning properly if the transparency is gone? rewards will appear on Solana but cannot be traced to the origin of which POC triggered the reward. So
Right.
CompsD asked that from Discord.
Yeah, so I know it's the case for mobile today. We're working on rectifying that. The actual. Go on, take it away since you can't hear me.
Sure. Yeah, I could pick it up. Sorry. Yeah, Mark's connection is not that great. So the data itself is all being stored in S3, and the code is in GitHub, and our plans here are to open source essentially all of it. So you should be able to, or anyone in the community should be able to process raw heartbeats. These are sort of the for mobile or raw POC requests and witnesses for the case of IoT. All of that data, we want to make it accessible. Initially, we're planning on keeping it, just to maybe take a layer back towards the implementation side of things, just for a moment. We are planning to make that accessible to anyone, but in a way that, where the requester has to essentially to ask for it and pay for it if they're pulling out of S3. And then, you can do the same exact processing with the exact same code base, right? So you should know, at this timestamp, this particular version of the code base was used, therefore you can generate the exact same kind of output, and that allows for anyone to verify. And we actually encourage it. We encourage folks in the community to do that, and service providers in the community to be able to do that as well. And you should be able to, at any point, here's the raw data, here's the sort of deduped data, and with all the sort of garbage thrown out, and you should be able to access any of these kinds of buckets along the way. Hopefully I repped you well there, Mark.
Robot, yes.
Robot, yes, I'll take it.
Good. And I think you answered that in there, Avi, but will the Oracle code be open source, or will there be some API to fetch the proof of coverage details?
The Oracle code will be open source, yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to mark that as complete. So Riabot asked that. So thanks for that question as well. Quite the...
I had John, if you had one, I was actually, unless there was a follow-up to the Oracle question, there's actually some good questions around some of the things related to tokens. So pulling one from, let's see here, this is Siegfried Mains. At the moment, transactions on-chain are paid in DCs. With a relocation to Solana, at least some transaction fees will have to be paid in SOL. What kind of activity and stakeholders of the network will require SOL? How will it be paid for? Will there be automated chain activities that require SOL buying, et cetera, et cetera? So, effectively, I want to speak incorrectly here, but the idea is that not that we are going to be requiring SOL so much as that everything is going to be moving on top of the Solana blockchain to the SPL standard. Abai, do you want to clarify? I just want to make sure I'm completely accurate here.
Yeah, sure. So because a lot of these transactions, everyone today transfers, H&T, for example, right? And that requires a certain amount of data credits to be used. And that's because that's sort of the think of it like the gas fee on our network. The equivalent is you'd be using some number of LAN ports, which is like the sort of units of SOL to do that kind of payment, right? So those kinds of things would you'd still need to pay on the Solana blockchain the same way that you'd have to pay for it on the Helium blockchain. So I think that sort of answers some of those kinds of questions. We still need to, with parts of the design here that we need to work out are really around how do rewards get paid, right? And that will be part of the design that we need to put together, and we'll sort of share that with the implementation plans. And then also like how to hotspot, effectively NFTs get minted, right? How to hotspots get onboarded on the Solana blockchain. Today, as a lot of you may know, that when you onboard a brand new hotspot, the manufacturer is actually paying the staking fee, the sort of onboarding fee, and then also the initial assert location fee. And that's usually, I think most manufacturers kind of bake that into the cost of the hotspot. So that's those are the kinds of things that we'll need to transition as well. Scott, does that answer the questions? I'm actually not looking at all of them.
Yeah, I think that covers that one. Let's see another question here. Grant, this one was the original decision to require hotspots be authorized by a maker to be a quick fix to bad actors lying about coverage. Now that an Oracle is the sole authority providing coverage, and assuming that the Oracle is not a bad actor and will not lie about coverage, we should no longer need permission from makers to participate in the network, creating a more trustless, permissionless network. Correct? This protocol should allow people to safely create their own nodes, since the nodes are no longer in a position where they can lie. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that one. No, that's definitely not correct. The thing that HIP 19, which is the HIP that requires the approval process for hotspot manufacturers, the thing it was really designed to do by requiring like a hardware key and the stuff that's sort of laid out there is to do what it can to prove that packets on the network, or proof of coverage packets in particular, actually come from hardware devices and not software emulated devices. It's full of problems, right? Like, I don't think anyone's trying to pretend it's perfect. Certainly, I'm not. But that's the intent of it, right? Is the purpose of that process is to have some way where you can say, like, okay, there's a packet on the network, and it almost certainly had to come from a real device, or at least the owner of the packet had to buy a real device. That's about as good as we know. So you still need something like that. There are all kinds of um, amazing ideas and thoughts that we've had over the years about ways that proof of coverage can be improved. Some of them are in HIPs. So, for example, HIP 22, I think, is a fantastic development, which has the idea of like a secure hotspot or a secure concentrator. And those, again, are like all things designed at like the physical level of Helium, right? Not really anything to do with the blockchain part or the software part. This is like, how do you do something in the real world, in the physical world, to prove that hotspots are where they say they are, or they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? So there's a ton of work that needs to be done there. Part of the aim, honestly, at least from my point of view, for HIP 70 is to free up a bunch of resources and time and focus that we spend on L1 blockchain problems and redirect them to things like, how do we improve proof of coverage and how do we make it better? So quick answer to your question is unfortunately not. That doesn't, they're sort of unrelated problems that having an oracle doesn't really help. It may allow us to go faster, because we can iterate more quickly on the oracle. We'll have more resources, we'll have more focus, we'll be able to spend more time on proof of coverage. But HIP 70 on its own does nothing to really solve that problem directly.
The same person who asked that question asked, can we they said they were afraid that their questions will be censored or dodged. So I guarantee that Grant, we did not dodge or censor your questions. I am noticing some other questions coming in, so thanks for folks adding more questions to this forum. I'm trying to keep up on those as they come in. If, again, anyone's joining late, there's the community called chat. There's a link in there with a forum. You can add things as you think they are appropriate, and we'll try to include them. We are about to approach 100 questions, though. Scott, do you have a next question for us?
No, I'm looking through here. I mean, there's a lot of questions I think just kind of come back to, why Solana in general, as far as questions, just trying to get a better understanding from the core team on, how the decision was made. I think that, some of this was addressed off the call, but there's certainly a number of questions around concerns about reliability or chain halts. So I don't know if Amir, or Mark, if any of you three want to talk to that point a little bit, as far as the Solana networks, as far as overall reliability.
I can. I'm just trying to find a thing that I wrote actually in the community, because I thought it was one of the better ways I had figured out to answer this question. I think so. Firstly, I think some of the statistics around Solana and its ups and downs and problems are probably a little bit inaccurate. Would be my first sort of reaction. Just sort of looking at it from the outside, it sometimes sounds a lot worse than it is. So that would be just sort of one comment that I would have. Like in general, I think an important thing to think about, and it maybe applies to like a lot of the different questions that have been asked here, is that the L1 doesn't have to do a whole lot. So if you took the example just for a second of Solana being completely dead, right? Like it's unreachable for some reason. What would happen in that case is that mostly everything would continue onwards, right? Like the Oracle servers would still be there doing their thing. Maybe they're sort of a more decentralized cluster of oracles at this point. Hotspots would still be doing their thing. They would still be reporting PSC packets and data transfers back to the oracles. What would be delayed is updating of token balances, right? So if you imagine Solana was down for 4 hours or something, like something catastrophic had happened, you had beaconed your hotspot had beaconed 4 times during that 4 hours. The Oracle server like has all this information. It's still there. It didn't get lost. And so 4 hours later, when Solana comes back, the Oracle server would, say to Solana, hey, this not in the last 4 hours, here are all the proof of coverage events that occurred. Here are all the receipts that I saw. Here are all the witnesses. You need to update the token balances as such, right? Like person A should get paid X, person B should get paid Y. And so it would just happen later. And it's, one way of thinking through this also is to think about, because people have often asked like, well, what about using Ethereum? It never goes down. The way Ethereum like protects itself against load is by increasing fees to the point where it becomes sort of untenable to submit transactions, and that sort of naturally balances itself back out again and load decreases. So if Helium was running on Ethereum, we would basically run into the same problem. Like we would have some kind of logic in the Oracle servers that would say like, hey, if the gas fee is over, X value, you need to, like Oracle server, you need to wait until the gas fee comes down, and you can keep querying the chain or whatever every 30 seconds to see when the gas fee is improved. And then you can submit the transaction when it's below a certain number. Like you can't imagine paying like $200 or $300 or something for a reward transaction on Helium would be insane. It would be untenable. I don't know where those fees would come from. So in that case, like whether the chain is down or whether the fees are high, like you actually end up in the same sort of logical state, which is that it just doesn't work. Like the Oracle server has to kind of hang out for a second and wait until it comes back. And so that's an important thing to think about in the line of questioning of like, why didn't you choose X blockchain or why didn't you choose Y blockchain, or what happens when the thing goes down? Is that like, unless it's catastrophic, like unless the thing is like dead for like weeks or something, or days maybe, not really a huge deal. Like you're going to lose token balance updates for a while, but data's still going to get to where it was supposed to go, and proof of coverage, beaconing and receipts are still going to be there. You're just not going to know for a little bit. So that's my catch-all answer for why Solana and why not X, Y, and Z. But in general, and Solana specifically, I think there's a bunch of good stuff that we like. The fact that it uses Rust as a language, I think is helpful. It allows us to write code that's sort of a little more error-free, let's say. The transaction fees are absolutely tiny relative to any other chain. Like whether that is sustainable or not in their own ecosystem, I don't exactly know, but for now it's a phenomenal driver. The developer ecosystem is pretty good. Like you've got frameworks like Anchor and stuff. Like I found the wallet ecosystem to be quite good. So I should probably not say Slope or something because they just had that fee leak. But Phantom, I think, is a really good wallet. So again, it's just more tools that people can use on the network. Their mobile project, I think, is interesting to us. I don't know exactly what we can do with both the Saga phone and their mobile stack, but definitely well aligned with what we're doing. And also the fact that the big exchanges have support for the SPL token standard, which is kind of like the ERC20 idea on Solana. is helpful because that, both exchanges, but also things like ledger wallets and stuff like that. I think most of you know, like we've been stuck in this sort of experimental status on Ledger for what feels like years. And so, you get the benefits of all of that compatibility basically. And that's true for some of the other chains too, but I don't think any other chain has that combination of stuff. And the fact that it feels almost real time with how quickly blocks get created, maybe not a huge factor, but definitely kind of cool from a user experience point of view when you're interacting with wallets and changing hotspot locations and asserting hotspots and stuff like that. It feels like you're using a Web 2 app. Like it's very, very fast. So that's kind of my point of view on Solana.
Yeah, I agree with everything Amir said, and I think one thing just to highlight there is that if 5 years from now, if this was the wrong call, let's just say, we still have ledger state that we can migrate off, and because of all that oracled state that we can migrate, like that's a possibility for us, right? So I think this entire architecture really is resilient to something that's catastrophic. So I think that's something that also to think about here.
Great, thanks guys for for the thoughtful answer and by adding on there. Some of the stuff that I think there's a couple of things that are a little bit more kind of for individual like host operators. So as far as when you guys said HIP 70 proposed moving to Solana, does that mean I will be mining Solana instead of HNT, or I got that wrong? So again, this is probably a good one worth clarifying. You won't be mining for Solana. Actually, you wouldn't be mining for HNT. You'd be mining for either the IoT token if you're supporting providing LoRaWAN coverage, or you're going to be mining mobile token if you're providing 5G coverage. So just to clarify, and again, the idea with this proposal is that those tokens are just simply existing on the SPL standard. See what else. I guess another one again. Will I have to do anything for the migration if this happens? Will my hotspot and app update automatically and run forward on the new chain without the need to do any complex or manual updates? And when will this happen? Thanks in advance. Since that, if you want to, since that might be around like your tokens that you're currently holding potentially.
Right. Yeah. So I can pick up the sort of user experience for HNT holders today and hotspot owners today, and folks like that. So as far as and so more to come, obviously, on the exact implementation of how this will happen. But one of the advantages that we have is that your wallets and your seed phrases should turn into a predictable Solana address. So today you can open up your a wallet app on the Solana side like Phantom or Soulflare. And put in a seed phrase and generate a wallet that's compatible with the Solana ecosystem. And we can essentially do a ledger import, like we're going to be, the way that this would actually be implemented is we'd be halting the Helium chain, figuring out everyone's balances and their assets, like their number of data credits that they have, the amount of HNT or mobile or the hotspots that they have, and migrating that state into the Solana chain. So that's a migration that we'll do, and we're going to be building some tools along the way. Once this HIP is approved, that sort of shows people, here's your Solana wallet, here's your Solana address, and we can one of the things we've also been thinking about is making it possible in Solana's testnet to just start to see your balances and start to play with it. I think once you start to get a feel for these things, I think it becomes a lot less concerning, I think. And so we know, obviously we intend to do that.
Great. Keeping things moving, there's a question here. Is there any preferential treatment for existing validators who convert directly convert to vote escrow tokens in terms of VHNT received for a given lockup period, or can all HNT holders convert to VHNT at the same rate? I believe that there is actually a HIP in progress around this idea, as far as the idea of, I'm just trying to see if I can find some notes, giving validators who pre-commit, some extra voting or staking power potentially. I think that's a HIP in progress, but I don't know if you guys know anything on that or can speak to it, but I think that that's being authored.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about this idea. I've gotten this feedback already, actually. It's interesting. So I'll sort of answer this in two ways. One, when one of the advantages of using this vote escrow token model is that anyone can stake and anyone can lock. So you don't need 10,000 HNT to lock up and be able to participate and earn for the IoT network or the mobile network, or participate in governance, right? You can put one HNT in, and I think that's a huge win for a lot of the community who want to be able to participate in this kind of staking. So that's one. The other thing, I think, Scott, what you're talking about, and I've heard this feedback as well, which is, it would be nice to, be able to kind of signal that you are going to be staking on the other side of the transition. And I have a couple of ideas of how we could implement that. So if there's a formal proposal on this, I think it could be really, really interesting. And I think it could really show that there are validators today who are interested in staking and sort of locking their VEHNT before this migration even happens. It certainly would actually make our jobs a lot easier, I think, from a ledger export and import perspective, because we could then the best time to do it is actually before we halt the chain.
Great. Still looking through. Yeah, certainly a lot of questions of the core devs considering any other platforms, L2 rollups, for instance, what the trade-offs consider. I think we've covered a lot on again, like how the team came to it. Again, the idea that there's really not necessarily the needs from an L1 are very much simplified, given the components run by oracles. So I'm just trying to see if there's anything that's kind of differentiates on those questions a bit more. So I'm really going through the spreadsheet right now. Joey, if you've got another one handy, because there's an awful lot of these about just, again, what specifically about Solana. Again, some of these things I just want to at least emphasize from my side. It's not necessarily the technical merits, also the fact of, again, you're talking about one of the fastest growing developer ecosystems, and I certainly know there are other L1 ecosystems that have large developer communities that are growing quickly. But as far as the developer communities, the significant composability of other tooling features that are available, obviously a benefit of entering into an ecosystem that has a large DeFi ecosystem, just opens up more utility for the tokens longer term. So there's certainly a number of things that align beyond just the kind of technical merits of the chain itself. Here's one that's a little bit different. What impact is there to those of us who are running our own ETLs? Our current data about rewards and witnesses punted to Solana level. How will this be made available? For free, specifically. That's from Big Sky.
Is it safe for you to talk yet, Mark? I know you were kind of waiting.
I don't know. It depends how my robot's feeling right now.
It's like I can sense that it's there, but maybe it's okay. Did you catch the question?
Of course not.
So I'll try again. Amir, you got it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sure. So it was what impact is there to those of us running our own ETLs? Our current data about rewards and witnesses punted to Solana level, we'd go blind. How will this be made available for free? It's actually almost the exact same question right next to it from Normium, which is for those of us following the chain by a node or ETL, how will we get new information and ensure consistency with historical records?
Right. Thanks, Norman. So we'll work with ETL to basically ingest files from S3 buckets and update reward tables just like we do today. Once the shift happens to Solana and our existing chain is no longer active, obviously that data is doesn't consolidate.
I think the attempted thing to say there is that trying to get ETL, some equivalent version of ETL that will exist so people can consume both both the Solana side of the chain, but also the Helium specific things like proof of coverage stat or data and data credit information. So optimally, it feel roughly the same. I don't know if it will be one for one match, maybe, I don't know, but
I think it'll be really close. I think we get ETL pretty close, at least for the POC and packet side.
there you go.
Yeah, because there's another question again, similar line of questioning of why would we have to pay for S3 data? We run our own routers and ETL and get data free. Why? Yeah, basically, people are just concerned about the transparency and being able to access these things for free that they're doing now.
Yeah, I'm open to other ways of doing this. The problem we've had so far is that we get tremendous abuse on anything that we offer for free, and we just had a really hard time, like being able to justify egress costs the way we have been so far. But I'm very open to other ways of protecting the insane abuse that people are putting on APIs and buckets of any kind that are being offered today.
Maybe we make hotspots IPFS pin everything on the chain as it gets generated.
Oh yeah, that'll help. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in here, all sort of asking the same question, which is how long will this take? So how long will the implementation take to move to Solana and off-chain POC?
I believe the off-chain POC side of it and the packet offload side of that will happen in relatively short order. I think in the order of a short few months, and no guarantees. The actual offload to Solana will probably take a few months to basically get everything integrated. Hand waving wildly since I'm not the date guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the desire is sort of year's end on the Solana part, or by the year's end. So something like that range soon.
Yeah, it's soon for sure, right? So we think that these two parts can work in parallel. Specifically, the Oracle side of things can be worked on by the Nova Labs team, and the foundation can drive the Solana migration. And I think that if we do this in parallel, one of the things that I think really is possible is by the time we're ready to vote, like we actually have a fairly like sure way to build the off-chain things, and we're actually started this work. I think a few folks in the community have noticed that we started prototyping, and there's some protobuf PRs going around, and there's some PRs going around for the packet verifier. So I think as like everything we're building is open source, so it's all out there, and we're already starting to think about this, really mostly to try to validate our design that we came up with this in the SIP.
Great. And I'm only going to drop this in because it looks like Normium just put a follow-up to his initial question. He said, to clarify, this is around the kind of the ETL and the access to data. He said, we're not looking for tooling. We're looking to ensure open access to proof data. Otherwise, there's no proof of value, and just confirming the data will be readily available to consume from the network as opposed to data dumps or supported tooling. So just making sure that was clarified from Normian, who had the original question around ETL.
I think it's a fair question. I'd like to understand the difference between the readily available data versus data dumps. The thinking is you'll have access to the raw ingest data for POC beacon and witnesses, as well as the derived versions of that basically get rewarded. All of that will be available. Is there going to be like some high-level SQL-like API to it? That I think that's to be seen. At a minimum, it will be available in S3 for you to pick up and index in whatever way you see fit.
That dropped off a little bit for me at the end there.
Oh, good.
I think that the summary is that all the data will sit in S3, and anyone can grab it, run their own open source Oracle,
exactly,
and compare the results with the Oracle that's submitting transactions on chain.
Here's a question a little bit related possibly to the Solana platform. So will the implementation of this HIP affect the ability to utilize ledger wallets and give more access to quote unquote platforms where tokens are exchanged?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly will. I mean, minimally, you've got all the Solana dexes, so the decentralized exchanges that are based around Serum. So I personally love that. I think that's like, I think dexes in general are a super interesting development, and I think the best ones live on Solana today. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just general sort of SPL token compatibility is pretty large. So HNT and mobile and IoT will become an SPL token, which means that it should be compatible right out the gate with something like Ledger, any exchange that's ever listed an SPL token, which is, I think, pretty much all of them, will be able to list HNT without having to do any other work. And so we've had this challenge with wallets, and like I said, we've built most of the stuff for Ledger, but we had to do it ourselves, and it's still taking Ledger a long time to actually approve HNT. So being able to having to not do all of that work, I think, is a huge win, and allows ideally for greater compatibility with wallets, exchanges, dexes, liquidity pools, any DeFi things. Like, it could be anything. I have no idea, but it sort of becomes out of our control. It's just an SPL that can be used like any other SPL on Solana, like USDC.
Here's a question that I've seen kind of come up a couple different times. I think it's worth addressing the concern. With this change, will HNT become obsolete as a token?
And the quick answer is no. Really, most users shouldn't even notice that it's on a different chain. You'll still have the same wallet app. You'll still have the same Explorer. Really, you shouldn't notice anything other than your wallet address will be a little bit different. That's about it. So otherwise, everything functionally will be the same, and HNT will still be its own token, and everything else.
Same burn utility, like all the story we hopefully all know.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. Per what was described in HIP 51 and 2 and 3, but that's nothing really changes from that point of view.
As a maybe follow on to that, I did see some questions. I can't quite remember who to attribute them to, but folks are kind of wondering what their hotspots will be mining in the future. So, of course, this opens the question of the IoT token and how it's involved in this change.
Without getting deeply into HIP 51, I think the easiest thing to say is that the implementation on Solana is intended to be what's described in HIP 51. So LoRaWAN hotspots would be mining IoT that is redeemable for HNT, and 5G hotspots will be mining mobile, which is also redeemable for HNT. So the intention for the migration is to do HIP 51 and HIP 70 at the same time, such that what ends up on Solana is what's described in HIP 51.
So I am noting we're at the past the top of the hour. I'd like to sort of fit in probably 2 or 3 more questions. I'm just trying to look through and make sure I'm not grabbing anything that's redundant. And there's still questions coming in, so I'm just reviewing those really quickly.
And by the way, as a reminder, we're going to host another AMA sometime next week, I would expect. I think we're looking at Wednesday for that, but we'll get an announcement out to the full community on Discord and Twitter for the exact time of that for, and again, next round of discussion on this.
And I've seen some comments in the chat saying this call has helped them understand a little bit more what's going on or feel a little more at ease with it. So definitely appreciate those comments, and the team that's here. Appreciate y'all taking the time to jump on and answer questions. I think we'll see a lot of these questions repeat themselves. It takes a while for this information to get around. For anyone who's listening in, we will try to get a recording of this together and shared, and hopefully you can sort of share some of this information more broadly, just to make sure that the community has an understanding of what's going on.
And something else, actually, because I'm also kind of scanning through the chat quickly. So for stuff like, I see some comments here around hacks on the Solana network. So something to bear in mind, again, like that, those are, at least the one that I'm thinking of, is that that's something that happened at the application layer. It's not something that was, the base layer, to the best of my knowledge, has not been hacked. I think we're talking about things that happened at the application layer where there were vulnerabilities around wallets. So that's not something that would affect, again, that's not something that would affect what we're looking to do here. Those are application specific versus network issues. So, and then this is just, just something to be mindful for everybody. There's a lot of FUD that gets spread around Twitter for, really what L1 hasn't faced its own share of folks who are kind of gaslighting or casting fear and doubt. So just make sure for anything that you're reading and reviewing that understanding where the real root issue was, if it was a network issue versus an application issue. Just something to make sure we're all bearing in mind. Joey, anything else that you're? I'm just kind of going through the questions still, and I think there's still a lot of things that were kind of, again, some redundant.
I think Dahl may have kind of covered this, and Dahl, I don't know if you want to jump back in here, but there is a question that's asking, is the switch going to make it easier to run a private console for IoT devices? And the reason I wanted to field this is just, of course, usage of the network has been sort of top of mind for folks lately.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it right now, if you want to use the network, you're kind of restricted to this console router that we've built that is, frankly, unlike any other LNS that's out there. So again, how do we increase accessibility? How do we increase usage? This is what this new architecture is about. And so folks can take whatever LNS that they're using, whether it's ChurchStack, whether it's another LNS, and plug in and start using the network. And so we're pretty excited about, the team is really able to double down and shift focus and create this foundation to allow anyone high confidence to start using the network.
I'm personally excited about that. Yeah, I'm getting comments saying just that my head hurts. So there's definitely a lot to absorb in all of this. So appreciate everyone taking the time to understand it. Here's a question from Hans that I wanted to throw in here. So what is the long-term outlook for oracles? Are there any ideas to decentralize them similar to how validators work today?
I don't think we have a perfect plan for this yet. My perspective on it is that priority number one is to make the transition to get, proof of coverage and data transfer to be reliable and secure. And so I think there's a lot of rapid iteration that is needed on proof of coverage, especially where we've had lots of ideas just kind of sitting. We've got Semtech is interested in building a secure LoRaWAN mapping device, and we've got so many potentially interesting approaches. HIP-22, as I mentioned. There's also a bunch of data science stuff that we've been looking at that is also really interesting. And so being able to go quickly on that stuff is a benefit of having this Oracle model versus everything being bundled into the consensus protocol. So, or being part of consensus, I should say. So the goal there is to do that, right? Get everything to be, at least in a significantly better place than it is today. minimally be quite reliable, and then start focusing on like how to distribute that a little bit more, or open it in such a way that someone could, for example, stake a proof of coverage oracle and join the pool just like they do with validators today. I think minimally it's critical that the work that the oracles do is verifiable and inspectable and observable. So that's kind of like a minimum requirement, is that we have to ensure that that works. And I think the way Mark described it should make sense to everyone. And all that code will be open source, and then fix, make it better, make it faster, and then spend the time on, how do we turn it into a sort of more permissionless validator like model. At least that's the plan in my head right now.
All right. I think now that we're about 12 minutes after the top of the hour, again, we're going to have more discussions on this, making sure that we're addressing folks' questions, not just in Discord, but creating the space for live discussion. So we'll be at least an AMA next week. We'll get back to folks with time on that. Happy to continue the discussion between everyone on Discord, but certainly I think we could keep going on, and a lot of the questions that at least I'm scanning right now do seem to be a little bit on the repetitive side. So if there's anything that we didn't address and miss, obviously there's a lot to go through here today. Let's keep those going in Discord. We'll try to get another form out potentially ahead of the AMA to see if there's anything that's notably different that we need to address. But I do appreciate everybody taking the time. Again, please read the HIP in detail. Allows for us to have more productive discussions. But thank you to Amir, Abai, Mark for all of the clarification around some of the development areas. Joey is my partner in crime from Foundation. Thank you for help with moderating and running through the questions. And otherwise, look forward to seeing everybody in Discord, and also in a few weeks for those who are going to make it to New York.